Welcome back, everybody. So, in today's episode, it's all about healing what I call the spiritual helper wound. So, whether you're a caregiver, an intuitive, a healer, a therapist, a mom, a dad, or just someone who's always been the one that others turn to, this episode is for you. And I have returning to the podcast a very special guest, one of my dear soul sisters, who is a part of my ground crew, Katie Burke. Katie,
Hi.
welcome. Hi. I'm
Oh,
so glad you decided to do this with me.
so happy to see you and to do this. This is wonderful. I'm super excited to be here.
And, Katie and I, for anybody who didn't tune into a former season of Small, Medium at Large, where Katie was on, Katie and I have a very long history that precedes even this lifetime. Right? We have these soul groups and we travel together, and she's a very important part, one of my soulmates. But Katie and I, in this lifetime, we went to high school together and then part of college together. And Katie is the one who witnessed my spiritual journey from the very start. Like back when I was doing automatic writing, scribbling from Grandma Babe on the other side, thinking I was losing my mind. And Katie was the one who would sit down and help me process everything that was happening. So you've been with me
Yeah.
for the most important parts. And more recently, in sharing some of the work, Katie's been there for me that I've been doing on my journey of healing and learning my soul lessons. And that revolves around high functioning codependency. And that's what I like to term as a spiritual overfunctioner. And so Katie and I, in talking it out, we realized we have some parallel lessons going on right now, right?
Always seem to have.
I know. Well, and that's what happens when you find your people who are in your soul group, you're mirrors for each other. And so, and that's how we're able to hold each other accountable, but also be each other's sounding boards to help each other through it. Okay, so HFC, let me just start with this. High functioning codependency. Terry Cole, she's an author, a teacher, a therapist, and I first heard about this because we all know codependency, but that alone never fully resonated because it's not like for me personally that was dealing with addiction or substance abuse issues, and that's typically, the old paradigm with that. But for me, the high functioning codependency really resonated. And Terry has a book called Boundary Boss and also Too Much. And I really started to understand and learn more about this. And it's basically the pattern of doing too much for others and confusing love with self-sacrifice. Okay. It's overfunctioning, overgiving, overdoing, oversharing, like all the things. And so we'll go into that more, but it's sneaky because on the surface, it looks like generosity and like being the strong one, right? But underneath, it hides as depletion and resentment and a disconnect from our soul truth and what's really highest in our highest and best good. And so honestly, it becomes at our own expense. And so, Katie, when we were talking about some of this that was coming up for me personally, she shared with me a perfect example connected to a soul contract that she has with somebody very near and dear to her, maybe even a couple people. But I'll let her share more on her story in a moment. But that experience in talking with her was so impactful, for her and for me sharing mine with hers, that is what inspired today's conversation. I was like, you know what? If she and I are both experiencing this, then other people have to be as well. And I know other people are based on so many clients I work with that have experienced the same lesson. And so before we go into Katie's story, I just want to start by defining a few of these terms so that we're all on the same page. And so high functioning codependency really is doing everything for everyone while appearing to be fine. Right? We all know when we say, I'm fine. Is that really true? And feeling this over responsibility for others. And then the spiritual overfunctioner defined would be taking on the role of healer or empath to the point of self-neglect and believing it's a divine duty, right? So again, it's at our own expense. And then soul contracts. For any of you listeners who have followed me, you know what soul contracts are. But for anybody who's new, I do a deep dive into soul contracts in my book, What's Your Heaven? But the soul contract is the loose blueprint or the agreement that you signed up for pre-birth. Okay, so you get together with your counsel, your guides, and you sit down and make this contract or loose blueprint detailing the lessons or life assignments that you're here to learn and or teach with certain, soulmates that come and go throughout your life. And it's for your own mutual growth. And sometimes it's through hard lessons like letting go. So let's just start by talking about what does it mean to be a spiritual overfunctioner? And so I just want to throw out there some signs that you might be one and just take a mental inventory for yourself as I kind of give you a handful of these. But the first would be is you feel guilty saying no, even when you're exhausted, right? And that's a big one for me and you. You often fix other people's problems before they ask. You go into solving mode, right? You're more comfortable giving than receiving. That's a huge one for me. I'm personally working on receiving. And
For you than it is me.
yeah, that's definitely a me thing. And you feel responsible for other people's feelings or outcomes. Okay. And so the hidden cost of any of this is burnout, feeling resentful, feeling invisible, joy depletion. I know that's a big one. And so, from a soul contract lens, we often attract these roles like rescuer, therapist, savior, because we've agreed to help someone else evolve. Okay. But not by doing the work for them. That's the big key distinction. And so, there's also karmic patterns at play. And, if you've had lifetimes of being the martyr, let's say, or being the caregiver, or even the controller, okay, that energy can carry over. And sometimes the lesson is not how to love more, but it's how to love with healthy boundaries. Okay, so I'm sure many of you listening are saying, yep, 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 like that resonates. And it's because it's universal. And so, Katie, I would love for you to jump in now and just share whatever feels right for you in your experience.
Yes. Well, it's been interesting as I've gotten older, and as my mother has gotten older. The big thing for me that I find that I keep running into is caregiving for my mother. We lost dad 20 years ago, so mom is on her own. And, earlier it was, I found an extraordinary parallel between my mom and my former boyfriend. And before I kind of slid into this more of a caregiving role, it was just sort of the helper role. And it tended to be a lot around technology, but a few other things. And I am notoriously lousy at saying no to my mom when she asks me to do something for her, even when it's something I really don't want to do. My sister and I joke, even when it's stuff that we don't even do for ourselves. I don't get new televisions because I don't want to deal with the technology of
Yes.
upgrading and doing all of that. But yet I step in and help my mom when she asks to do some of those things that I really can't stand doing, that really lower my frequency. So my most recent boyfriend, I really struggled with him because he would ask me to help him with things that he didn't know how to do. And a lot of them were things that I didn't really know how to do either, but I would spend hours researching, trying to figure out how to do them. And I would start to resent him because I was thinking, well, why can't he do this himself? I don't know how to do it either, but I'm sitting here doing the research. Can't he sit there and do the research and do that?
Right.
And I really started questioning, I questioned whether I was being a good girlfriend. And we had some conversations about it too that made me feel like a good girlfriend would do this. And so I kept doing it, and I just realized that it would make me grumpy. And, you know, I don't do well grumpy. I'm here to be a light and to shine.
Sunshine, sunshine.
Sunshine, yeah. And so
Right.
when I'm grumpy, this is completely counterproductive to my soul's purpose, which you helped me recognize years ago what one of them really is. And so it was interesting because I had this struggle with my mom, say 20 years ago, that I just was incapable of saying no. And then had this same thing show up with him, and I was incapable of saying no. And the tape that kept playing in my mind was, I guess a good girlfriend would do this. I mean, a good person does this. When somebody asks and somebody says they need help, then you help them. And so I never said no. Or if I did say no, it would be out of anger and frustration after, you know, 3 tasks prior that I probably should
Right.
have said no before that. So during the pandemic, it was really interesting. I got to spend a lot of time with my mom, and she ended up helping me work through this inadvertently. I
Mm.
said, this has got to stop. I can't keep saying yes to these things that just really bring me down. And so I asked her, I said, what can we do to fix this? Because this is getting way too hard on me. And she said, well, it would be helpful if you would say no, but say it nicely. And it dawned on me that, you know, after you're saying yes and you're starting to resent it and starting to feel unrecognized and underappreciated and all of that,
Mhm.
by the time you reach that boiling point, you know, you can snap and just be a real jerk or
Right. The
sound
reactive.
irritated.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas if you do it sooner, and I asked her for an example, which I mean, this is one of my karmic lessons I know for sure that she and I resolved together. And that was that she said, well, just say like
Just say
nice,
no. Yeah.
friendly, yes, with like a nice smile on your face. You know, can you do this for me? No. So that is what I have employed using with her since then. And that has really worked. I did not get the chance to use that with my former boyfriend, but I realized it's about boundaries. And I know we're going to get into that later,
Yeah.
but drawing those boundaries, first of all, recognizing them and then drawing them early enough that you don't, as you say, get reactive to tell the person, this is where my boundary is. And it doesn't mean the person's going to like it, right? Because they want you to say yes.
Well, right.
But
And especially when they're used to you saying yes,
yes,
right? I think the big thing is when you have a course correction halfway through a relationship, it's uncomfortable for both sides. And you just have to expect it's a learning curve. And yeah, and so you have to really practice. It's a practice to change how you operate and the expectations.
yeah.
But isn't it funny how all the shoulds, like you should as a good girlfriend show up, as you should as a good daughter. And what Spirit has taught me is that the shoulds are mind made, right? That's not your intuition. That's not your higher self. That is the ego. It's the guilt tripping, right? It's this learned behavior and false belief. And if we can just free ourselves of the shoulds.
Absolutely. And I remember talking to one of our mutual dear friends going through a particularly difficult patch of time when mom was really struggling with a sort of an acute health issue. And I said, well, you know, I just really want to be a good daughter. She's done everything for me. I just really want to be a good daughter. And she said, our friend said, who determines if you're a good daughter? Who decides that?
Mm,
And that hit me so hard. I said, well, I guess I think she does. And after we talked about it, I realized really it's whether I think I'm being a good daughter. That's all we can do
yeah.
is be proud of who we are, who we show up as, and not try to, I mean, we could shoot for the stars and never get recognition for doing everything
Right.
we've done. And the other thing you and I talk about is sometimes we give so much in one area and the person doesn't even feel that or recognize that as helpful. and then we're falling short
Oh,
on
right.
something that they may think would have been great. And it didn't even dawn on me to try to do that to
Well,
help.
and sometimes what I've learned is that they become resentful. Like, when we overdo and overgive, sometimes they resent us because on some unconscious level, on a soul level, they want to be able to do it for themselves. And so that's the enabler. Sometimes we enable a situation and then we take away the opportunity for them to show up and figure it out for themselves. Like you said, with the technology.
Well, just to add on to that, not only do we take it away from them in their soul contract, but two times specifically, one a while back with my former boyfriend, and one just popped up recently with my aunt when I was giving care to her. I won't go into the details, but the point was I could have stayed a little bit longer to provide care a little bit longer so that my uncle didn't have to step in and help. And I realized if I keep taking this on, then I'm actually robbing my uncle of the experience to show up and give care for her, which is good for him and probably part of his soul contract, and equally good for her to feel the love
Mm,
of her brother showing up when he was planning to show up. And so sometimes we step in there and we're robbing others of the
yes.
opportunity to be of service too, when it's completely depleting us, and maybe somebody else can step in and do their part, and it's good for both parties involved, and it's best for me to just go home and give my own care to myself.
100% on all of that. I mean, I'm hearing spirit say yes, 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 because it's all about being self-aware. Like, and you are just wise and you can understand the language of soul contracts and what's mine to do, what's not mine to do, but not everybody is. And that's amazing that you were able to step back and make space for him to step up and in. And, so I guess what were your early signs of, depletion, like when with your caregiving, whether it's your aunt or your mom or your boyfriend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember one time, and I'm sure I called you and told you this. I've never had this happen to me before. I stopped recognizing my mind, the way my mind worked, which was terrifying. It's difficult to explain other than um, it was like I couldn't make decisions. I couldn't
Mm,
make normal, easy decisions about, what we're going to order for dinner to, should I renew my contract in the place that I live. I just was incapable of making decisions, and I just didn't recognize my mind. That was the scariest one. Another thing that was happening was I recognized that I was having some PTSD, and I think I told you the story of when mom was going through some acute back pain. She'd get up at 2, 3 in the morning and open a freezer door to grab a bag of ice to put on her back because she just couldn't sleep. She couldn't get comfort. She was in terrible pain. It was awful. And so then after that, even when someone would open the freezer door to get a popsicle, I realized that I would feel like a jolt of, it was kind of like a gross, stingy feeling that would shoot up and down my body and kind of tingle all over in my skin. And it was because of the freezer door. And I just realized I'm being triggered by the freezer drawer.
wow. Yeah.
So that was another example of something that I just knew that it wasn't good. And most recently, I was battling with some health stuff, and I needed to go to a couple of doctors, and I needed to find some help, and I just put it on hold. And as I was assisting my mom, I realized my symptoms were getting worse and worse. And I just pressed pause on them. I ignored them. I pushed them
Mm.
aside. In the back of my mind, I was hearing, you need to take care of this sooner rather than later because it's going to get worse and may become chronic if you don't address it. And I just kept putting it off. And that was terrible. And I will tell you,
Mm.
I didn't want to tell my mom about it because we were so focused on her care that when I finally broke down, and this is what happens with me, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong. And then all of a sudden I just lose it. It's usually in
Right.
tears. It's rarely in anger. It's usually just a full down sob session where everyone ends up hugging me because they don't know what else to do. But when I reached that point, she said, well, why didn't you tell me that you were going through all of this? And I said, well, because we've been so focused on you and I don't want to worry you. And I should have told her because then we
Yeah.
probably could have made some arrangements so that I could have been caring for myself as well.
Yes. Wow. The book, The Body Keeps the Score, and it's all about this. It's like, it starts out as a whisper, and then it becomes, if you don't listen over time, it becomes a roar. And so we want to catch it right away and acknowledge it and address it. Because what always comes through readings is you can't give what you don't have. So if your cup isn't full, you can't fill up other people's cup. I mean, it's just such an obvious truth, but we so often forget it. And that's part of the caregiver. We put others' needs in the high functioning codependency. We put others' needs, wants, desires before our own.
Yeah.
And it's,
Exactly where that comes from, that we feel this need to be. I was contemplating this before today. Is it that my ego needs it? I need to feel good about helping somebody else. Because I think there's some of that. I do feel good. I feel of service when I'm helping somebody else. So I do think there is some ego in that. But I also think there is guilt that if I don't do it, I'm going to feel guilty if I don't help. And then the other thing is, and I think there's some healthy stuff in here, there's compassion of,
yeah,
well, if she doesn't get help from me, where will she turn? Who will help her if I don't help her? And
right.
it feels awful to be either in pain or to be scared or to feel lonely. And so I think it's a mix of all of that stuff. Probably 60% is tied with the ego, but then the rest is, your heart.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with all of that. And in addition, it could be ancestral lineage stuff passed down. This
Yeah.
is what you do. These are the shoulds, the expectations. And sometimes we're here to break the agreements that are unhealthy because it's it's again depleting. It's at our own expense. And both can be true. You can show up and be compassionate and caregiving and of service and honoring self-care first,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's this kind of it's a very slight, adjustment, but a very significant one if we put ourselves first. And so thank you for sharing all that. And I know I could relate to so much of what you were saying. And so let's now talk about like boundary setting as an act of love. Because I think people with the high functioning codependency tendencies often mistake control for care. So it's like trying to micromanage outcomes so everyone is okay. That's that covert control. I know I have found myself doing that, but that actually disrespects another soul's path, saying basically, I don't trust you to figure it out. And it's what we were talking about earlier. It's like we are robbing them if we step in and take control and rescue, solve, and fix for them, because if you're not okay, I'm not okay. Really, at the end of the day, it's about that. We're not comfortable. So, but we rob them of the opportunity for them to learn the lesson, to do the thing, the hard thing, whatever it is. And so, what if honoring soul contracts means stepping back so that the other can step in and can grow? And that lends to everything you just shared, with your aunt and your
Yeah.
uncle.
Well, how does that show up for you? Because I know for mine in this life, at least in these chapters of my life, it really all seems to be about health. And I'm, researching doctors and medical and stuff like that. And I'm always thinking, God, this is darn near life and death that I'm dealing
Right.
with. But showing up for somebody that you are possibly taking away their capability to do
Mhm.
and succeed on their own.
Yeah, well, for me, the pattern has really been being the strong one, the consistent one, the reliable one who always shows up and takes care of all the responsibilities, especially the men in my life. And it started with my dad. And, I didn't know at the time, but when I was a kid, I was living with a narcissistic father who was bipolar. That wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. But even until he passed away when I was 30, I was doing that. And then I chose a first husband where I did it for him. And, I see it playing out in my current marriage. And, I'll go back to my first marriage. The most loving thing I did, and I think Brian can validate and agree with this now, is to say, I need to stop, rescuing, solving, and fixing and being the strong one to give you the opportunity to get out of my shadow and to step up and into your power and your capability. And he did. And he's amazing. He's soaring. He's thriving. And that was a gift, but I could have continued the enabling because it felt safe for him to hide behind me. And it was
Interesting.
scary to step out there and reinvent himself and find his purpose and his career. And he did it. And so it shows up for me as what I've recognized lately is it's that covert control where I'm hyper vigilant to make sure everything is already done and taken care of because I don't necessarily trust that people will show up for me and that they're capable of doing it, either not right the way I want it done.
Well,
Wait, you're going in and out of audio. Say that again.
that they're capable. That's
That
big for me, that they're capable of doing it. And it's interesting you said whether they'll show up for you, but I think for me the question is and that they're capable. And I think it's even harder in a situation like yours when you've got a family, because it's not just do they show up for me, but do they show up for the family that I'm providing for?
exactly. Exactly. And for me, that's my self-preservation Enneagram 9 stuff. I need to feel safe. I need to feel secure. I need to feel like I have a plan and I have some control, even though I know that's all an illusion. But there is a healthy balance of that, what I'm learning. Show up and do your part, and then surrender and let the universe show up and do its part. But don't step into somebody else's lane, right? Stay in your own lane and then give other people the dignity of their own process to do it for themselves.
Know where that line is though, right? I mean, all of this is like scope creep a little bit, you know? I
It
mean,
is.
it's like you do it and you do it, but then when do you know, okay, now I'm doing too much? When am I helping and, just kind of helping a friend or a husband out versus now I'm not in my lane anymore.
Right. Yeah, no. Something I've learned is that when I give out of obligation or out of fear because I feel out of control versus I'm neutral and I give from generosity, that is the difference. It's the frequency behind which I'm choosing. So let's say my husband is like, I have this $5,000 bill and I can't pay it. And my past response would to just jump in and say, just let me take care of it to make this go away, throw money at it, solve the problem, right? That's not always a healthy response because that's not mine to do. But let's say I recognize like this is his to do and he really can't. So from my generosity, I'd say, hey, I want to pay half of that. I want to give you a hand up and not a handout. And let's just pray on this and ask that the universe helps you find a way to pay the other half. But I'm doing that from a different frequency of compassion and empathy and generosity versus fear. Does that make sense?
That definitely makes sense. Where does a feeling of obligation fall in that spectrum between fear and generosity?
Well, I think it's
Very
when
closer to fear.
you really have to do some check-in and say, obligation, meaning, is this what I signed up for? Is this part of my karma?
Mhm.
Or is it that person's karma?
Yeah,
So, and then it's like the guilt tripping. It's like we sometimes guilt to learn behavior. And so we say, gosh, if I don't do this, I'm going to feel guilty because I have the means to do it. And I'm watching that person struggle,
right.
right? It's hard. It's a super nuanced and like there's a fine line in there. And you really, I always tell clients, you have to stop and get out of your head, get into your heart,
Yes.
because that's where your true guidance lies. And then I always say, Spirit, show me. I give this to you, show me. And then sometimes I know that minute, and sometimes I have to sleep on it, right? But you want to respond, not react, because you don't want to incur more karma, more negative karma by, overstepping and not honoring the boundaries.
Well, that's really good advice. I think, you know, I feel like I've got a lot of things figured out until crisis hits. And then it's like everything just falls away and I lose myself. I lose everything that my soul believes, all the, everything that I know in my heart to be true about soul contracts and, life after life and all of that. It's like when crisis hits, I crumble.
I
And
so get it.
it's so hard to find myself in a space where I can sit and say, Spirit, help me. I'm always asking my dad, who's passed, can you just help guide me through this? Give me an understanding of what I should, what is in my highest interest, highest good and best interest to do. And I like that you said sometimes it's not instant, sometimes it comes tomorrow. I'm impressed that it comes tomorrow for you. Sometimes I feel like I don't get it until I'm through the crisis and it's a month later and I look back and I think, oh, that would have been the better way to proceed.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's true too.
But it's important to
Yeah.
stop and ask. It's important
Yeah.
to pray. It's important to try to quiet the mind and hear the spirit.
If there's one thing I've learned is that the number one thing that we could do to make things easier and clearer is to invite in divine intervention through
Mm.
prayer. And prayer is just truly having a heart to heart with the divine, with your loved ones in spirit. It doesn't have to be formal. I talk to my guides the way I talk to you. Sometimes I'm very, very direct and commanding because they've told me to be.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. And they love us unconditionally. So, but what I would remind listeners is that if you don't invite it in, law of free will says spirit cannot offer assistance unless it's a life-threatening situation. And so our job is to kind of put it on autopilot, like, oh, the first thing I do is pray. And I call in my higher self, source, which I call Mother, Father, God. You call it universe, and call it whatever you want. But it's that energy of truth, of unconditional love. And ask, help me get out of my fearful thinking, my judgment. Help me see this through compassion or divine eyes so that we're coming from our higher self so we don't create more karma if we're coming from fear.
Love that. And so far, my biggest takeaway is ask for divine intervention. I
Yes.
don't think I've ever done that. I know I've experienced divine intervention. I think I've told you an experience when I was in South Africa and my mom was having an issue and I was going to fly back and I called the airline and I said I've got to get back early and the flight was like going to be $2,500 to change it and it was just insane. And that night I prayed And the next morning I woke up, I got on the same airline's website and I changed the date. And that date that I had changed it to, they were going to be able to change my flight for free without the change fee and without a
Wow.
fare change. And it was because I changed the date. Then I talked to my mom that morning and she said, actually, the doctor can get me in earlier. Is there any way you can get in earlier? And I said, that's the flight that I just changed to. So it worked out that I was just trying to book the wrong date, but then I had divine intervention that showed up as, you can make this change completely for free. You've just got to do it at the right date. That is when your mom's going to need it. And it was like, it happened before the doctor's schedule even opened up. And so I've experienced divine intervention, and it's just, one of my lessons is to learn to trust that and to follow that. Ask for the divine intervention, because like you say, they can't interfere unless we ask to please help step in, and then to listen to it and follow that guidance when it
Yes.
shows up.
Yes, miracles. That's what this is. Miracles are available to us. They're meant to be common. And the only reason they're not is we're either not available to receive them, or we're not inviting it in, or we're not expecting it.
Or we don't trust it.
We don't trust.
That's a big
right.
thing for me.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. That goes back to the miracle of being able to connect to your departed loved one in spirit. That's a miracle, but most people doubt it. They don't trust. How could I do that? And I know for a fact we can all do it. So we can connect to them, we can talk to them, but we can also hear from them. And sometimes hearing from them is through the divine intervention, the miracle, the synchronicity, whatever that means for you. And so, okay, so some real life tools that have helped me with these boundaries, the soft no or the joyful no, like you were saying your mom taught you.
Yes.
Right? I think that's a big one. No is a complete sentence. Just giving yourself permission to not explain yourself. I know that's been a big piece I've been working on. A gentle but firm decline without apology. Nope, that doesn't work for me right now.
Right.
And that's it. So I think that's a big, permission slip for all of us. Energy check-ins, before you say yes to someone or something, just ask yourself, like, is this mine to do or is this not mine to do? If I'm going to do this, am I giving from overflow or generosity? Or am I giving because of obligation or because I should, the shoulds? And really be honest with yourself. Another thing is detachment with love. Okay, so loving someone deeply and completely, but not rescuing them. So you're detaching from what happens. And that's that letting go of control, which is not always easy, but I really do think at the end of the day, it's like saying, I love you, but I love myself too. And not sacrificing your peace to save that person when it really is not your soul contract. It's not yours to do. Right. And so what would be one self-care practice that you've used to stay really rooted in your boundaries, after like creating that space?
Well, one thing, and I'm not sure that this falls under self-care, so I mean, it kind of does. But one thing that you had mentioned earlier that has really, and we've talked about it in the past, but I do think this is essential for people to pay attention to is the person asking you for help? If they're not, maybe they're just asking, maybe they just want you to listen to them. So I think a big thing for me is wait until the person asks for help.
Yes.
And because I often am jumping right in, and, I think, and I don't want to say all women are this way, but I think, women who are used to being competent and strong and independent and can get stuff done will immediately hear something that somebody needs and process, identify, oh, I could do this. This is how I could help the person. Well, that person hasn't yet asked me for my help. So let me just sit and listen. And sometimes we're just there to listen. And so even the other night, I was talking to somebody on the phone and they were going on and on about the issue they were having. And it was an active effort on my part to not offer solution, to not offer advice. I mean, I am the first to advise. And then I always say, not that you asked for my advice. And so it's like, keep my mouth shut until somebody really does ask. And then the other part of that is again, we go back to, you're robbing the person of asking, because that's sometimes really difficult for somebody to ask. So if they really need your help, they have to ask.
Yes.
And I think that's important. Sometimes I think, oh gosh, is that kind of a jerk thing to do, to force them to ask? And I've worked on changing my perspective on that it's not. It's wait until they ask for help.
Yes, amen. You're psychic, because that's where I was going to go next with all of this. Because one of the high functioning codependency traits is auto advice giving. So it's everything you just said. And I do it too. And, the biggest thing is when we rescue, we auto advice give, we dive in without them inviting it, we do rob them of the chance to rise up on their own. But when we go from rescuing to witnessing, we just hold space with presence. We're holding sacred space. It allows for a transformation. And so, I guess the question would be, so how do we stay present without absorbing their pain and everything? Because as empaths, I mean, we feel it all. And then we have to just sit there and witness it. It's so uncomfortable, which is why we tend to jump in and auto advice give and rescue and solve and fix, because nobody wants to feel that discomfort.
True. That's super fair. For me to sit there and not say anything was excruciating.
It's so hard. I know.
Because it's on me, right? So you and I have talked about this, like cross your arms and, visualize a white bubble of light around you. I mean, and I hate to even say this, but sometimes I think, I don't know if everybody listens as intently as I'm listening. Like while I'm on the phone and somebody is talking to me and talking, and I could absorb all of it, or I could also be painting my nails or something, because they really just need airtime.
Yes.
They don't really need
They just need to vent.
taking it in and feeling it and all. That's not doing them any good. They just need space to talk. And so can I do something too that prevents me from feeling what they're dumping out into the world? They're not intentionally dumping it on me. They just need to dump it out of themselves.
Yes.
So,
Well, two things just came that I feel like I'm being guided to share. Is what I like to do is when I'm listening, I ask, am I listening to listen? Am I listening to understand? Or am I listening to solve? And when you're listening to listen, it just means let them vent. You're just holding
yes.
space, right? And so you can either just go through that in your mind, or you can ask the person, what do you need from me? And then if they really want you to help solve, there's your permission slip.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
And then
good.
and then the other thing is what you said, what tools that I do is I put a gold bubble around both of us so that we're held in this kind of divinity, so that if they're venting, I'm not absorbing it. Or a white rose, an energetic white rose in between you and the person. You just imagine it there, and then you take the stem of the rose and you imagine it rooted into the earth, like grounding it, and then hook it up to source. And so that white rose absorbs the toxicity, negativity. And then when you're done with the conversation, you blow up the rose, or you shred it or dissolve it. But that has seemed to work. So maybe play with those tools.
They're very helpful in the now, in the moment. And then what you had asked before, some self-care tips, I find it extraordinarily helpful to go out for a walk.
Yes.
And just walk and walk and walk. If if I can. And then I often call you.
Yeah.
So
I'm honored.
call a friend who you
Yeah.
just have to come and dump that on like 2 degrees of separation. I don't think it's nearly as painful for you to hear all this than it is for me to hear it from the
Right.
person that I'm giving care to. But I do think that going out into nature and being out in sunshine, or even doing it at night, whatever, breathing fresh air. Oh, that's huge for me. We talk
Huge.
about that hiking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nature is honestly the number one thing I think for me. Um, there's just so much, what I heard is nature vibrates at the frequency of love. So the Schumann resonance and all of that. And so you don't have to do anything. Just put your feet on the earth, breathe in the fresh air, get into the negative ions,
Yes.
and it shifts and clears everything. It's amazing. Um, so to just kind of wrap all of this up, I think the key is for some of us, a lot of us, is going from fixer to witness. Okay. And it's like you said, we have to bite our tongue and really like hold ourselves back sometimes. But a mantra I was taught years ago was what's mine to do, what's not mine to do. And really stay on your side of the street. Like try and just like at the end of the day, it's always between you and the divine, you and God. It's really not between you and that person. The people in our lives are our polishing stones. They're the soul players in our soul contract that are mirrors for us and giving us these amazing opportunity to polish ourselves, to learn the lesson and, to evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective because that feels self-centered. And how do we reconcile that with this innate need to be there for others too?
Well, so
I
this
mean,
is full circle. That's it. Because at the end of the day, you have to be self-centered, meaning have a healthy sense of self. You have enough self-love, self-worth, self-esteem, self-respect to have healthy boundaries, to know, what you are worthy of and what you deserve so that you can embody that. You can give other people permission to do the same by you doing it for yourself. And from that place, you are whole, you are full, and you are able to authentically and continuously show up and serve others. Again, you can't give from an empty cup. And so it's not, there's a big difference between being a narcissist where it's all about you and being a little bit, there's a healthy selfishness that I'm learning, you know? And and so I had a client say, I was describing her husband. I'm like, he's a narcissist. She goes, I know, and I'm the nicest. He's the narcissist, I'm the nicest. And I'm like, that sounds very familiar to me because sometimes we're so nice, right?
yes,
That we're
right.
compromising our own needs and desires. And we're not being selfish enough to hold our boundaries, hold our center, honor, and know that we matter.
For sure.
Right. And so I think, it just comes with the territory of being a caregiver and an empath and someone who is highly compassionate and empathetic.
Yes.
So it's really self first so that the intention is how may I serve? How may I be of service to others and offer from the overflow?
Yes. It's so interesting to have this conversation with you because there's a friend of mine, she always says when I'm talking about myself and I'm being critical of my behavior or how I'm doing something, she'll say, "Hey, don't talk about my friend like that." And I think it's so sweet when she says it. She's
Yeah,
basically saying, quit beating yourself up. I don't like the negative things you're saying about your own self.
I love that.
And, I feel that I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders and supporters. And I always want you to realize and recognize that you deserve all of these blessings that come to you. And so I get a little protective of you. I know we've talked about that,
It's
but
so
it's so
sweet.
interesting to hear you say the things. It's so much easier for me to give you, my dear friend, advice and say to
Right.
you, you deserve this, and absolutely hold your boundaries, because you deserve everything, all the abundance that the universe wants to send your way. And you don't deserve to be giving and giving and giving so much that you're depleted. It's so easy for me to say that to my dear friend. It's harder for me to say that to myself and
Mm.
recognize that I'm being depleted and that I deserve all of that. So it's great to have dear friends and our soul mates that we walk through each incarnation with. But it's interesting to hear you say those things, because I feel like the things you're saying, I say to you all the time. And I
All the
feel so
time.
strongly about you. But then when I'm talking about myself, I'm like, oh, I could work on this for myself a little
That's
bit.
right. Well, we're just here to reflect it back to each other. And
Yes.
that is our role. And it's again not a coincidence that we go through similar lessons at very similar times, different details, but the same overall lesson. And so
Yeah.
I love it. Well, so if you're loving what you heard from me, you should thank yourself. You've been a very good space holder for me.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
thank you. And so before we go, I just want to leave listeners with this simple reminder, all of us, something that Spirit has shared with me is that you are allowed to rest. All you overfunctioners, okay? You are allowed to let go. Let go, let God. And you are allowed to stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. And so healing the spiritual helper wound isn't about closing our hearts. You can stay open hearted and loving and kind. It's about redirecting your love inward first so that what you give flows from fullness, not depletion. Okay. And as you go back into your day, just ask yourself, what would it look like to love myself the way I love others? It's what everything Katie just said. It's so easy for us to give that to others, but sometimes it's hardest to do it for ourselves. And let your answer guide you toward gentler choices, clear boundaries, and a deeper inner peace, because that's what it's all about. And so I just want to thank everyone who tuned in for listening, and all of you out there doing your soul work, for showing up for yourself. You are seen, you are supported, your team spirit is there. I know this. You know this, I hope. And you are so worthy of a life that feels like home to your heart, to your energy, to your spirit. And so until we all connect again, take good care of yourself, and wishing you brightest blessings and all love. And thank you, Katie, for joining me.
Namaste. Love you.
Namaste. I love you too.